In episode 12, James and I were joined by our first ever guest on the Open to Work podcast, Yaser Ahmed, the VP of People and Talent at HelloFresh. We got into a bunch of topics around applying and focusing on job search, but also some amazing tips around how to really stand out in an interview. This is really going to help you land your next job, so we hope you enjoy it. The job market has changed since the pandemic, and so have the rules.
What worked 3 years ago no longer works. There's so much more noise out there and so much contradictory advice.
We're here to help you cut past the noise and decode the new rules.
And to guide you to your next opportunity. We're going to give you our shared expertise and help you figure out how to make the most of this post-pandemic talent market.
So join us on this journey if you're open to work. Hello, James.
Hello, Matt. I'm coming to you live from a different location, as you can see from my background.
Very exciting. I was commented on recently that I've changed my background, and it's because it was due to audience feedback that everyone said James's background was more interesting than mine because I was in a white room, and so I changed my background in my entire work office space to be more interesting and to make sure that I looked like I was not like a robot person. And so welcome to Series 2 of Interior Design Masters. I'm your host, Matt. And no, but we're here obviously in the Open to Work podcast, so here to navigate people on their job search journey. And we're mixing things up a bit this year, and this season. And we're bringing in guests because James and I are not truth sayers. We are only just two people. We're only just two perspectives. And so we wanted to bring in other people's perspectives from people and recruiting leaders who we respect and admire and content creators from around the world. I mean, how do you feel about having other people on the podcast, James?
I think it leans really heavily into what we've been saying ever since, or principally what I've been saying ever since episode 1, which is it depends. It really, really does depend. And I think you and I have tried to be really careful about couching what we say as these are general principles and general practices based on our experience in the types of organizations that we've worked at. However, you and I have only worked at a limited number of organizations in a limited number of geographies. And so this is a really fantastic opportunity to get other perspectives that then hopefully folks listening can have more of a 360 view of what different voices think and what different perspectives are. Hopefully, you will continue to hear consistent trends and themes, and you can figure out for yourselves what makes most sense based on the sector that you work in, the geography that you work in, and the types of roles that you're applying to. But the more voices that can give slightly different viewpoints, I think really makes the final product for listeners even more helpful.
100%. And so with no further ado, we're going to introduce Yaser Ahmed from HelloFresh, who's the VP of People. Welcome, Yaser.
Thank you for having me.
But look, we've jumped straight in. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this episode. And I've known Yaser for a little while now, and he's kind of a linchpin of the TA community in the UK and an amazing leader around the world. But given that this is a podcast that's directed to candidates and for supporting candidates, we thought it would be really interesting to throw an interview question at him straight away. You know, so many interviews start with, just tell me a bit about yourself. So we thought that's the natural place to start. So Yaser, as we would do in an interview, tell us a bit about yourself.
So my name's Yaser Ahmed. I'm the Vice President of People at HelloFresh. HelloFresh is a global food delivery service company. Got about 25,000 employees. I manage roughly around about 9 teams. So I manage TA, talent management, exec, employee branding, corporate comms, mobility, rewards, etc., etc. So my people function is roughly around about the 150 to 200 mark. And I've been there for about 3 years now, growing it through COVID. We took it from 10,000 employees to 20,000 employees over the last 3 years, and my career has just developed into a more people-orientated role. And prior to that, I had about a decade worth of experience focusing on scaling companies from 0 to 1,000, or in much larger companies like Wipro, where they have 260,000 employees and the hiring is about 10,000 hires a month. Traditionally, I'm not necessarily a recruiter. I actually didn't fall into recruitment. I trained as a certified Scrum Master back in 2012. And then from there, I worked in a a design consultancy that kind of asked me to focus on recruitment because I many years ago before that had done 3 months at an agency, hated it, quit. And so my role developed from that kind of scrum master into doing a bit of recruiting to actually I enjoy this, let me do a bit more, and eventually getting into a more full-time position. So I'd describe myself as more of a change maker. My role really is to go into organizations, take them from A to B. That's pretty much it. So whether that's solely on recruitment or talent management or combination, that's my focus. And that's who I am. Other than that, I've obviously family side, 3 kids, live in Reading, worked all around the world.
Awesome. Thank you for that. James, how would you evaluate that?
I feel the pressure.
So obviously we had a bit of a pre-chat before we started recording, and Yas said he didn't want to do this, and he was worried that he didn't think he would do a good job. And I think you did a great job. You should be, in case you need to find a job. I know you have one right now, but in the future, you don't need to practice. You'll tell me about yourself. You've got it nailed.
So Alderson James are one of the leading people and talent agencies. Since 2013, they've been responsible for over 1,000 people and talent hires, including one in a company that I used to work at. They helped me hire my head of technology TA. So I know the guys there pretty well. They've been responsible for scaling some of the most innovative companies in the UK and the EU. Also recently just launched in the US. So even folks in your neck of the woods now, James, can get involved for contingent, retained and executive search. And they also now do embedded through AJX. So they can do it all.
It's an odd question, isn't it? Tell me about yourself.
It is wild, isn't it?
I was constantly thinking while I was speaking, what have I missed? What have I missed? What have I missed? What are the important things? What matters to Matt and James? Do I tell them the size of the company? Do I tell them the scale of my work? Do I tell them about the tenure? Horrible question.
But it's one that does come up so often still, and we've been interviewing. James and I are open to work, right? So we've been interviewing, and I would say that in almost every interview that I've been in for the past, since I've been on my open to work journey, I've been asked this question at every stage of an interview, regardless, unless I'm meeting someone again. And so it's one that we sort of do need to be prepared for still at all levels of our career, to be able to have like a 90-second, 2-minute narrative just to control that story. And I like to describe it as like launching a confirmation bias. Like if you can really land, it's an opportunity to get into someone's confirmation bias really quickly. And if we have that opportunity and it's open, and an open door has been made for you, let's run through it.
Yeah. When I was interviewing for HelloFresh, the CEO founder, he actually asked me the similar question. And luckily I did it by video, but if I hadn't done it by video, I probably would have taken a notepad with me just with some notes on it, like written in a very small format. But I remember clearly before the interview, I was thinking, I wrote down all these notes about my career and I thought, and I read it out and it took me 10 minutes. And I thought, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to tell this in like 60 seconds? Because I'm talking to the CEO of a big company, he's busy. He's not going to want to hear me for 10 minutes. He's checked out by then. He's going to want to listen for the first 15 seconds. And I realized, I looked online and I started looking at people that I admire and people that I want to aspire to be like. And I noticed a small pattern. And I noticed there's this virtue signaling in their profiles. Either, if you've ever logged on LinkedIn, you'll always notice people's titles as ex-Google or ex-Netflix or ex-Amazon. It's virtue signaling. Hey, I worked at this company, so I must be good, right? And I thought, well, I didn't work at Amazon, so I can't do that. I can't say to him, hey, well, I'm an ex-Amazonian, and then suddenly he's got context. No, I can't do that. But what context can I give him that he will understand? And I always then went with, and learning from others, I realized revenue, company size, and scale is always 3 things that people can get a lot of context from very quickly. I worked in a company that is operating in 17 countries with 25,000 employees and 10 billion revenue. Okay, great. Now I know roughly the scale of your operation that you worked in. That gives me context.
And not just in the interview, but also on your resume or your CV. That anchor statement under every single company that you've worked for is really helpful. It's critical if the company that you've worked for is not a household name. But I always argue that even if you did work for an Apple or an Amazon, sure, everybody has heard of those companies, but actually very few people could tell you off the top of their head, what is their market cap, what is their revenue, and how many employees do they have. So even if even if you did work at Apple, I would still put the revenue, the employee count, and the number of countries, because to your point, whether it's a recruiter, a hiring manager, or somebody in the C-suite, that instantly allows them to locate you and your experience in the context of the size and scope and complexity of organization, which then helps them figure out the size and scope and complexity of your role, because director can mean a million different things, VP can mean a million different things, but located in the context of company scale, that's a really critical data point.
I always say it to people in interviews. I say it to my colleagues. I say it to my recruiters and my managers. When you're asking a target-based question, always look out for the ambition in the answer. So if someone says, I did sales of 100K every year. Okay, well, what does that mean? 100K. Well, I achieved 100% of my target at 100K. Okay, that's a bit more. I achieved 100% of my target at 100K, but my ambition was always to hit 150K. And these were the things I was doing leading up to that 150K to get to 150%. The last thing I remember is the 150%, not the 100% that you actually did. I remember what you tried to do. And that's context to some degree. You're giving them what was your target, what you tried to do, what you actually did. And that is more meaningful for people because they understand your thinking. So in between that messaging, they're understanding, oh, this person has the right values that we have. They aspire for more. They're go-getters, etc. If you're in any interview, whether it's a sales interview, marketing interview, whether it's operations, whether it's a tech interview, there's always a target. There's always a KPI. There's always a deadline. There's always a project that needs to be finished. If you're able to say, this is the goal, I achieved it or I didn't achieve it, but this was what I wanted to do, it just shows more context to how you think. Hey, I'm not just someone who tries to hit their target. I'm someone who goes above and beyond. And that is what every interviewer wants to hear. I go above and beyond. I don't just look at this job description as a piece of paper. I look at it as a box that I can stand on top of, not just within.
I love that idea. Box that I can stand on top of, not just within. And as you've been through in one of like the peak COVID businesses in lots of respects in HelloFresh, which for anyone who doesn't use HelloFresh is a meal delivery business. It will send you your entire meal box, etc., for all of your meals that you want to cook within a week. And you grew from 10,000 during, like, basically from 10,000 to 20,000 in essentially the period that we've had COVID and post-COVID.
I think it was about 9 months we did that in.
9 months. Wow. Okay. I mean, I'd love to hear your observation as someone who is tapped into this, has facilitated thousands of hires, tens of thousands of hires over the last few years. How do you think the market has changed now for candidates? And is there anything that you would do differently with that in mind?
So I'd make it harder to get a job. I'm making it harder to get a job at my company. I think there's a sense of satisfaction you get from interviewing with a company and you knowing that it's difficult, and then you get the job. You feel a bit more proud about the job. I think at the moment with AI coming in, we're seeing an influx of applications where there is no commitment to the role, which I understand. But we need to differentiate ourselves as an employer. So we can't just have every Tom, Dick, and Harry apply for the role. We want the best of the best. So as an employer, I'm talking as an employer, not as a recruiter, right? As an employer, I want to hire the best people. So most employers are probably thinking like me at the moment, where they're thinking, okay, there's an influx of candidates on the market. I get to choose who I want to hire. So let me make it harder. Now, if I had to redo everything, I'd probably think about talent density, which is now something that's really apparent. Do I need 20,000 employees? Or do I just need 12,000 really great employees? And so the focus is on quality, not quantity. I think with every hyperscale up or every corporate right now, they're questioning their bottom line, saying, okay, can we be more operationally efficient? With ChatGPT and other AI tools coming in, people are thinking, how can I be more efficient? And I think what candidates need to focus on is their potential more. When they're talking to potential employers, they need to focus on what they can do beyond their current role. This goes back to my point about showing ambition. I'm an operations manager, but I'm also interested in marketing and X, Y, and Z. Interestingly, what I'm noticing is that when we interview people, we also want to know what other opportunities they're pursuing, what other opportunities they would like to pursue. How would we be able to transform their skill sets, turn them from I don't know if you've heard of the concept, the I shaped person, the T shaped person, and then there's like the pie shaped person and cone shaped person.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations want more cone shaped and pie shaped, pi as in the mathematical formula pi, because you want someone who's got multiple domain expertise, not just one. I don't want to hire a specialist in one field. I want to hire a specialist, a person with specialism in multiple fields so I can utilize more. And we're seeing this now. We're seeing this more, even in the tech space, you're seeing it. Like, people might deny it, but techies are becoming broader and broader. Managers are, not necessarily, we see it in the HR world. CPOs are more operations backgrounds, than just traditional HR backgrounds. We see people from McKinsey moving into big CPO roles. I think just I'd make it harder.
If you're flipping the switch on this and speaking to kind of candidates and how they should be navigating this market with the kind of knowledge of where you're sitting at as an employer and that your kind of understanding of how other employers are also acting now across this market, what's your message to them? How would you navigate this new world where getting a job is much harder than it was before and people are asking for different things than they were maybe a year ago?
My advice to candidates to get in front of employers is to engage with employers in a different way. So a lot of good employers are opening different channels of engagement. So you've got the traditional channel of application. I apply for a role. You got the traditional prospecting where a recruiter reaches out to you directly. Let's park that for a moment. That's the obvious choice. Then you've got the events that companies run. You've got the blogs that they post. You've got the podcasts they do. Proactively reaching out to them and saying, hey, I was at an event, or go to the event, or listen to the podcast, reach out to the author of the podcast of that company, whoever's hosting it. Reach out to the newsletters and connect with them, respond to them. I think it's about authenticity here. I think we know that you're doing this with other companies. So we know that it's extra effort for you to do it, and we appreciate that. We know that it takes a lot. It's like more recently, I get, I don't know, probably about 50 messages every week from people wanting a job. And they vary from, hey, here's my CV. Do you have a job at HelloFresh? To, hey, I really love HelloFresh. I'm a big customer. I would love to work for you. Here's my CV, right? I can't respond to all those people. We've got 1,000 jobs live on our career job site. And then someone replies to me and says, hey, I've applied for this role and this role and this role. Yaser, you're the head VP. There's no reason you would endorse me. Can you give me some advice? What would be the best way? What would be the best way to get in front of the hiring manager? I feel like I have to respond to that for my own integrity. So I think if you're able to also connect on the integrity side of companies, to ask them questions that will force them to respond, I think that's also a unique way of doing it.
I think you've highlighted an interesting disconnect there that I think we should explore more. If your goal is to make it harder to get hired at HelloFresh so that folks have more of a sense of achievement and accomplishment when they do so, the sort of implication is that you view it that it's too easy to get hired right now. And the general perception, right, wrong, or indifferent for candidates across the UK and across the US is that it's really hard to get hired anywhere right now. And so how do you see that disconnect from your purview, and how are you going to try and resolve that so that you can still make high quality hires, you can still create that sense of accomplishment, but you can still also acknowledge that the talent market is what it is? Do you understand where I'm trying to
Yeah,
thread
it's a
the
great
needle there?
question. I'm really glad you asked it, because we measured that candidate NPS. So we measure the satisfaction a candidate gets from our experience at every stage, from rejection, application stage, rejection at interview, rejection at phone calls, all the way to offer acceptance. And our rejection at phone interview or rejection at application is things like +6. So that means that people actually are showing a positive sign to our rejections. And the reason why people are doing that is we're extremely transparent about why the person isn't right for the role. I think the key here is you're not necessarily making it harder, you're making it explicitly clear what you need from a person, and why you need it. So, not being very broad in your job descriptions, but being extremely explicit. This is what I need, and this is the impact. Hey, by the way, I need someone for payments. Our payment systems are, if they're down for 1 minute, that costs us 20 million euros. So this is a highly pressured environment where we need someone who's had this experience before, because we cannot risk any failure here. That's why these requirements are a must have. Being clear like that, when someone applies and they don't have that experience, they'll understand, okay, fair enough. Like I get why they're saying I need the experience, because from their side, the risk is too high if I don't have the experience. That transparency is what helps us make it harder to some degree as well. It's not necessarily making the interviews harder or adding more stages. When I say making it harder, I'm saying I'm providing extreme clarity to the candidate. I'm trying to, that's my goal. And that's why in every job we post now, before we post the job, our vacancy strategy meetings are for every single job, even if we've hired that job 1,000 times, because we want to be crystal clear. Why are you hiring this job? What's different? If it's a software engineer, what's different from this one to the other one? Are you going to be just working on a small little light in the corner of your screen? Or is this person going to be working on the massive logistics plan that they have for the next 12 months? If you're a candidate and say, I know you've got this role, I know you're advertising it, but what's the implications of this role? Help me understand the context. You're providing all the context. Hey, why don't you get some context back so you can answer the questions better before you even get into an interview? Ask your recruiter, hey, by the way, why did they hiring this role? Yeah, sure enough, it's a replacement, but what's the impact of this role?
If you're kind of a recruiter listening to this, take that. There's some epic takeaways that from Yaser. They're like really, really fantastic ways that you can elevate and push your hiring leaders into kind of writing really specific, job descriptions. But equally for candidates, push back. Ask questions, be curious, really deeply understand what it is that the company you're interviewing for is looking for and the impact of that role, because it will set you apart as a candidate. I guarantee you asking good and insightful questions will set you apart as a candidate, but also it means that you know exactly what you're looking in for, and you're not going to be surprised, in a couple of months down the line when you realize that the role is completely different, or the company culture and operating model is completely different from what you originally thought, and you can have more impact and have more clarity of that role. So how we're going to round every all of our guest episodes is by asking them an interview question that was left by the person who spoke before them. So Yaser, you'll be leaving a question for our next guest, and we have prepared one for you. So James, over to you.
Yes. Could you talk to us about a time where you received challenging feedback, whether it was from a manager, a peer, or somebody that reports to you, that you perhaps found difficult to accept?
One of my leaders, so leader as in our C level, had said to me, Yaser, you're relentless, you're like a bulldozer, but you need to bring people on the journey with you. And I mulled over that for so long. I was like, what does he mean? Like, my team loves me. Everybody, I'm doing everything I can. I tell everybody about everything. And then I sat down with him and I said, look, this has been bothering me. Like, I love the feedback, but I don't get the feedback. Like, help me understand. He said, yes, what it is you're a bulldozer. I need you to help everybody else become a bulldozer. I was like, oh, okay. So what does that even mean? That's not my responsibility. He's like, yeah, but help me, help them. I'm like, okay, I understand now. So you want me to tell them how I do what I do so that they can copy some of the things? Yeah, bring them on the journey. And I really struggled with this bring them on the journey because I was like, I'm doing my job. Why would I be doing their job for them? And he's like, no, but you got to be a team player. Bring them on the journey. I'm like, I can't be a team player managing 200 people. They're managing however many hundreds as well. Like, how do I do that? And so what I learned from that was that perception is a reality sometimes. And in some of my meetings, what I'm doing is I'm disagreeing and committing and so focused on myself without providing any um, advice to others because I was so relentless on my prioritization and my goals. So as a leader, I realized that actually I need to take a step back when someone's speaking and telling them us about their problems. I need to contribute and share with them, hey, this is what I did in my place. You can do this if you think it's worthwhile. And after that, I got a couple of times doing that 4 or 5 times, just in 4 or 5 meetings. Wow, thank you so much for listening to my feedback. I really appreciate it. This is exactly what I mean. I think people really respect your word, and you sharing your perspective has really helped me because you and me are on the same page. Sometimes I can't say that, what you're saying, because they will just think, oh, he's saying it. Whereas you're saying it, it means a lot more. And my advice there is, again, get clarity, right? I was like, I don't understand your problem. Can you just spell it out for me? And I had to ask the question 5 times, by the way. Spell it out for me. What do you mean? Okay, just dumb it down for me. Give me an example of what you're referring to. Those are the questions I had to ask to get my answer.
No, that was great. Thank you so much for your vulnerability. We prize that on this show.
Yeah, thank you so much. And what's the question you're going to leave for the next guest?
So this one I love asking. Tell me a mistake you made that you don't regret. So tell me a mistake you've made that you don't regret. What I'd like to learn from that answer is, okay, were you able to look back and say, actually, I don't regret that mistake? And actually, sometimes it's okay to make mistakes because the silver linings that come from them are far greater and they do better for us. It's really introspective if someone's able to answer that question because they're able to say, look, I know I'm not perfect. And in an interview, you're pretending to be perfect all the time. So that's why I really like that question.
A really good question. I immediately went into like, what are the mistakes that I would want to talk about? But we can, maybe James and I one day will accumulate all these questions and then interview each other and talk through our responses to them. And that potentially is quite a good episode. But yes, thank you so much for coming on today. I think we covered like so much, and I think clarity has been really the kind of key takeaway on this. Providing context and giving clarity to people through an interview process is so important for both the candidates and the employers. And I think, for anyone listening to this, I think you now know exactly how to get Yaser to respond to you if you email him directly at HelloFresh. So good luck with that. And so if we want to find you on LinkedIn or if you follow you somewhere, how would we follow you or keep in contact?
Search me on LinkedIn. So Yaser, Yasar Ahmed, Ahmad on LinkedIn. I come up there. I'm also part of the talent community, which is like a global community if you're in the talent space. If you're not in the talent space, it's a bit difficult, but LinkedIn will probably be best. I'm not really on social media. I do respond to LinkedIn messages, a bit delayed. So if you've got any questions, happy to help. I'm always happy to help anywhere I can. But yeah, awesome episode. I really enjoyed the conversation. I reckon we could have spoken for a lot longer than
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to just get you back. We'll be doing these weekly with guests all around the world, and we'll have to get you back to kind of hear more of your perspectives and ask you some more questions and get into things in a bit more detail. But thank you so
I would
much
love
for your
to.
time.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, James.
Thank
Awesome.
you so much.
So that wraps our episode. Super interesting conversation. Absolutely love that. And as always, get in contact if there is a guest that you'd like to see on the Open to Work podcast. Email us at opentoworkpod@gmail.com. If there's a question you think we should be asking these guests, like Yaser, email us as well. Get in contact. And in the meantime, James, where can we find you?
As ever, on LinkedIn and every Wednesday in Forbes.
Awesome. And for me on LinkedIn, on my website, Matthew Parker Advisory, and here in Open to Work podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Please like and subscribe. We're here to help as many people as possible navigate this really challenging market. And so every time you share this, you're helping someone else as well. And so please love and share. Okay. Until next time. Thanks very much, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.